Hello, my name is Nicholas Kosovic, and this is the UBC Students for Freedom of Expression. Today, we are meeting with Faith Goldy online to discuss her immediate reactions to the Canadian elections that happened yesterday, as well as the future of Canada without, what is the future for Canadian nationalism? Let's get a Canadian nationalist view from this sort of results. So I'd like to ask you, Faith, given that I'm not quite sure what your view of the election was going into it, but given that the PPC is now basically over, given their results, what can we expect for the future of Canada?
Well, thanks very much, Nicholas, for having me on. I will say, as a caveat to everything I'm about to say, that Maxime Bernier has stated that he seems at the very least interested to continue on with this new project. Some would say a vanity project. I would say a worthwhile project. The only party that is serious about having a conversation around demographic replacement within this country and out of control immigration rates, which we have only been promised by both major parties, including the minority that's about to govern us, to be increasing at nauseum. We're going up to 350,000 above board in 2021, but it's really closer to 1 million per year when you include things like student visas, temporary workers programs, and other provincial programs, all with pathways to citizenship. So what is the future of the PPC and what is the future of Canada? Well, I think this week's election news was a huge win for one particular type of nationalism, and that's Quebec nationalism. Say what you will about their sovereignty and secession sentiments, it was not something that Françoise Blanchet really campaigned on this particular election season, but he was about putting Quebec first, and that did mean working in tandem with their premier, Françoise Legault. So were I the architect of Canadian politics, were it so, I would say two things. One, a word to the wise, I suppose, to the PPC, and one to the provinces going forward. To the PPC, don't run over 300 candidates in the next election, Bru. I know that you want to be a part of the election debates and be taken seriously by the old boys club at the Conservative Party, but what you really need to be doing is pick 10 or 20 ridings, and that's where you, pardon my French, blow your load when it comes to your financing and your get out the vote effort, as well as your volunteers. Focus on 10 or 20 winnable ridings so you can actually be represented. And I think that means Maxime Bernier necessarily needs to move into perhaps a more rural riding, maybe not even in Quebec. I think it'd be really cool to see him possibly, there's been some speculation from just commentators, not from any party insiders, what it would mean to have him go somewhere like Alberta, where his sort of ideas would be much more, I think, salient. I think it's a bit of a pipe dream, but I think he does need to move upwards towards rural Quebec at the very, very least, as opposed to Beauce, which has one of the lowest unemployment rates in all of Canada. Sorry, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, so a lot of your critics might suggest, and critics of Canadian nationalism, especially when it comes to immigration, they will suggest that given the results of the current, last night's election, immigration has no longer proven to be a focal point for Canadian politics. Now it is we've reached a level of unanimity when it comes to the Conservatives were moving farther left, of course, distancing themselves from the PPC, and we have a growth in not just the Liberals, but the Green Party and not the NDP, but the Greens certainly did relatively well this election as well.
Right. Well, I would argue that the Green and the NDP did not really campaign on immigration. In fact, this was an election really about nothing, and that includes immigration. Immigration was not properly discussed at any single part of this election, at least not in any serious manner. I mean, a minute or two within one English language debate wherein every party leader has 20 to 30 seconds to give you their stance is not what I consider a debate whatsoever. And consider considering the fact that, and you know this better than anyone, the academic institutions are not allowed to have these debates. We in the media are not allowed to have these debates. And hell, if you put a post on Facebook, you might get fired from your workplace for daring to engage in this debate. So to say that the debate is over, I would say no, friends. The debate has not even started in this country, and I worry in certain jurisdictions the debate will never happen because indeed it will be too late. If you look at the voter share breakdown, it becomes very clear that the Conservative Party of Canada basically has no path to a majority anytime in the near future, because in order to secure a majority, who cares if you have all of Alberta? Who cares if you have all of Saskatchewan and half of Manitoba? No one does, because 338 seats, guess what? 78 are in Quebec and over 100 are in Ontario. When you see that Toronto, all 25 seats are going to the Liberals, and like 28 of the next 30 whatever GTA seats are going to the Liberals, build a damn wall around Toronto, because I'm sorry to say, demographics being destiny, that is going to be a Liberal stronghold ad eternity. And so as far as Conservative Party goes going forward, sure, they have their base. I think it might be too late to have the immigration debate on a federal level, if I'm being honest with you, just because of how vote share breaks down in this country. And so this circles back to your other question about what does this mean for the future of the country. Call me what you will. I don't really care. I think Quebec is doing something right. I think the PQ is onto something provincially, and the Bloc is onto something federally. And I would like to see similar parties that put their own provincial interests first emerge out of all of the provinces, both at the provincial and the federal level. I think that the only way that the CPC, or really any right-wing party, can have any sort of relevance going forward is by campaigning, even on the national level, in favor of provincial rights. Because what this election showed us is that a united Canada no longer exists. And we can say it's all about pipelines, but demographics cannot be overlooked when the most diverse ridings around, say, Toronto and Montreal, the most populous ridings with the most votes up for grabs, are all tending towards more immigration and left-wing parties. I'm looking forward to the demographic data that we saw in the last 2015 election. I hope that we'll get the same sort of information released by the government of Canada. But what we've seen year after year is that ridings with the most amount of immigrants vote Liberal. So for the Conservative Party of Canada, they're screwed. I'm sorry to say, but they just are screwed because the seats aren't there. So I think that Western secession is going to be on the up and up, and you couple that with a rise in Quebec nationalism. I think a united Canada that is anchored in the navel of Ottawa is not going to be something we're going to be dealing with in the near to long-term future.
All right. Well, what about let's move on to the future of free speech, especially free speech at universities. I know Andrew Scheer has mentioned that he was thinking about legislating Chicago principles for Canadian universities. Now that the Liberals have taken power, what can we expect for free speech on campuses and broadly across Canada?
Well, look, the Liberal Party of Canada is no friend of free speech. It's a direct threat to their very existence that we debate any of the poisonous policies that they're ramming down our throats. They've already signaled the fact that they are going to be basically simpatico with the ethos and the direction that social media, big tech, and academic institutions are naturally inclined towards, which is censorship. They've already talked about the fact that they are looking to basically censor people, ban people offline, reward or penalize social medias, etc., for allowing people to engage in what I would argue is just free speech. Of course, you don't want to argue for violence against an identifiable group of people, whatever. But if I just want to discuss immigration to the country that I was born in, I think that I should be allowed to do so without being labeled a Nazi and being banned off of social media, deplatformed, and having the full force of the government behind said decision. So, the Justin Trudeau is signaled that he is willing to essentially pay off all media to become his propaganda arms, penalize social media that are acting as a publisher or platform for his political enemies. So as far as the academic institutions, he has nothing in his platform that says we're going to make sure that the most censorious universities are going to be the guys that get the most tax grants or something like that. But I don't think that he's going to be running to, say, a UBC free speech group's aides should they be mobbed by Antifa anytime soon. It's just not going to happen. We saw his own virtue signaling towards that Allah Sufi character, a Syrian refugee who bullied a bunch of PPC supporters, including calling a grandmother a Nazi. And once his family's restaurant garnered any sort of threats, then all of a sudden Justin Trudeau shows up, not for free speech and freedom of assembly, but for virtue signaling and protective lip service for a group of privileged people in Justin Trudeau's Canada, including Syrian refugees.
Is your there's been lots of discussion, even with your critics within the legislature, whether you would be targeted with a more they basically just want to get rid of you effectively. Do you feel like that's basically on the table? In the near future, do you think that legislators will effectively aim to expand what is hate speech and apply it in such a way that people like you or people who facilitate discussions like us might be under the gun by the government?
Well, I will say, just for the record, I serve God, not government, and so my team is just objectively stronger than Justin Trudeau. So they can't get rid of me, but they have made a damn good effort in trying to make an example of me, so that others don't dare think outside of the hive mentality, especially on issues around immigration, multiculturalism, diversity, and even some points of social conservatism, I would argue. Look, Nicholas, I'm happy to debate anyone, including elected members of parliament. I'm happy to engage in a conversation with anyone. The fact that they bar me from debates, they ban me from obtaining advertising space on mainstream media. They have me banned from almost every social media, save two, from all payment processors. It's a very strange thing, considering I'm sitting in a basement talking into a Facetune camera. I mean, it's not like I'm raising an army over here, I'm just asking people to think critically about the situation and realities we now face in a country that I love with every single bone in my body. So do I think that they'll continue to try to make an example of me? I hope not. It's a real pain in my ass, pardon my French. But they're coming for our firearms. They've already promised that. They're coming for our social media accounts. They've already promised that. They're coming for our neighborhoods. They've already promised that. So what are my options? Move further north. Well, I've already started. How much further north do I go? But the surrounding ridings around here have already turned red this past election. So demography is creeping outside of the cities. Okay, fine. All right, so I'll get banned off of my remaining social medias. Then what? Well, I go to writing books. Okay, who's going to sell my books? Okay. Well, can I have kids? I moved out of the city of Toronto, and I'll tell you, Nicholas, it's not just the government that is creating persecution. It is a social setting and social censorship that is occurring as well with these brainwashed, useful idiots. And to any sort of patriot that finds himself in a big city thinking that you can fight the machine there, go live with normal people in the country unless you absolutely need to be in the city for your own sanity. I had transvestites try to put cigarettes out on my cheek while I was standing outside. I was chased down the street by a black man. I'm constantly accosted by, everything from Muslims, I don't know why they'd be in a bar, to other identifiable minorities, we'll say. I couldn't go out for a peaceful meal in a big city. So it doesn't take the government to make an outlier feel like just that. But I'll be honest with you. I know I'm not in a fringe minority. I know that there are a lot of people who voted CPC who think just like me, who either were, frankly, not well versed enough on Andrew Scheer's pro-mass migration stance or were voting strategically. I know there are Canadians who, if they're not awake now, they will be in 2 to 4 years by the time that we throw Justin Trudeau out or elect a Jagmeet Singh, which is what I think is actually more realistic. So do I think that the government's going to continue to try to make an example of me? Maybe. I don't care. I obviously have alligator skin. Sorry to, we'll just say Canadian e-celeb fans for other e-celebs, but you see, Jordan B. Peterson, God bless him, but he's breaking down on television, You got different folks who are breaking down and crying about mean tweets. Honey, I've been around here for longer than a decade. I don't know how many more arrows I could have in my back. I shake them off and I just keep going. So I got a great family. I serve, a great God, and their persecution to me is a badge of honor.
Interesting. Well, thank you very much for talking with us, Faith. It's always interesting to have different perspectives. We may not agree on everything. Certainly, this is going to get us a lot of flack, but I think it is valuable to get, this sort of information straight from the horse's mouth, as it were. So,
I identify as a horse. I'll accept that.
Thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned for some more interesting interviews from the UBC Students for Freedom of Expression. Thank you.